this week, kind of related, not necessarily related to RBT supervision, but related to just training staff in general. And basically, you know, I've got a kiddo who started back at the center. You know, he's been off since March, started back in person at the center. And, you know, I watched his therapy session, and he is all over the place, for lack of a better word. You know, his hands are everywhere, and he's flopping, and he's this and he's that. And the therapist who was working with him is fairly new. You know, we've been giving her some coaching, et cetera, but she's still new, and she's got some instructional control, but not a lot. She's does a really great job, and she takes feedback really, really well. And she was so sweet. She's in there, and she's really trying to focus in on the data collection. And I've got to get my 10 trials in, and I've got to, you know, well, the condition says run this, et cetera. And I was like, okay, so let's go back to your 3-term contingency, 4-term contingency. She's taking her RBT course right now, so these terms are there for her. And I was like, listen, like, you know, you think about the SD and the response and the reinforcement. And she's like, yeah. And she seemed to have that down. She's like, I've got this. I give I give this, I look for the response, and I do this. She's got that. But I was like, you're missing the huge piece. And that huge piece, like the 4th contingency, would be that EO, the establishing operation, or the motivational operation at the beginning of all that. And she missed that. So I was like, well, what's he working for? She couldn't tell me, right? And she needed to get that motivation. He was flopping on her because he really liked sensory input, and he had his hands all over the place because I think he really wanted that feedback in his hands. So I swapped places with her, which probably isn't a great thing to do during COVID, but that's how I work, and that's how I continue to work. You know, swap places with her, and I said, watch this. And I, first of all, paired, and I didn't pair for an hour. I paired for like a minute, and I shook his arms, not hard, but just enough to give him some input. And he went, and he started laughing. And I just did some shoulder squeezes to calm him a little bit. And he was like, okay. And then he was focused. And then I gave him the instruction again, and he got it. Like, he got it after erring on how many trials, right? Because he was attending. And then instead of giving him an edible or giving him a toy, whatever else, I just gave him more sensory input, and it loved it. And within like 3 or 4 trials, he was like bang on. So then I went back to my BST model, and I said, okay, now your turn, you try. So she jumped back in, and I walked her through it. And I would say probably after about 10 minutes of this, like he was getting it. We did a receptive ID program, and he's like, I got this now. And then afterwards, she did a matching program on her own, and she's like, Shayna, you've got to see this. He's matching now. And it's all because, not because he couldn't do it, but it was all because she didn't have the attention and the motivation first to start. So she was running through the programs really well. You know, she had the beautiful, like, you know, SD, response, reinforcement, or, you know, error correction, what have you. But she was really, really missing that establishing operation. And she was really also missing like that attending piece and the learner readiness piece. And I said, listen, like, if you have to slow it down and you don't get 10 trials in, that's okay. Because I would rather this kid learn than to just go through the motions, right? She went, oh, you know, and then we got some really nice manding in there, and he was starting to mand, and he was saying shake because he wanted his arm shake, and he was saying squeeze, and he was saying a few other things. And she's like, okay, do I need to end this to go back to like matching, or do you stay with the, and I'm like, he's talking, stay with the manding, keep going. And so it was really nice. We got some really, really beautiful interaction. But my kind of off on a tangent is really, really, really work on that motivation piece to begin.